3, 2, 1. Our live streaming now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's virtual Audit Risk Scrutiny Committee hosted by Bassett Law District Council. Given the current challenging situation we all face following the outbreak of COVID-19, new legislation has been approved that enables councils to host virtual meetings rather than requiring members to be present in the committee chamber. When making a decision, this keeps everyone safe by maintaining a social distancing equity and allows business to be conducted in appropriate manner. It is very important that councillors can hear each other, so I will invite members in alphabetically order to introduce themselves. In so doing, test their broadband connection. I'll do a roll call of members. My name is Councillor David Challoner. I am the chairman of the Audit Risk Committee. Vice chairman of this committee is Councillor Carolyn Troop. Can you hear me, Carolyn?
Yes, Chairman, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson. I don't think Gary's in attendance, so if he joins the meeting, obviously Cara will let us know. Councillor Cliff Entwistle, can you hear us clearly?
Can hear you clearly, David.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman, can you hear us clearly?
I can hear you, David.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can, David.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can hear you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Ben Soffler, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can hear you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Clarkson has now joined the meeting.
Right. Can you hear us quite clearly, Councillor Gary Clarkson?
Yes, Chair. Apologies for lateness. Had problems with the computer.
Okay, thank you. I will also now introduce the officers in attendance. David Hill, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly, Chair.
Thank you. Stephen Wormold, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, Chair, I can hear you.
Thank you. Julie Falger, can you hear us clearly? I think we've lost Julie.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't realise. Sorry. Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Turner, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can hear you, Chair. Thank you.
Cara Hopkinson, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
I don't know if is Ellen online yet, or is she still having problems with connection?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. And obviously the caster can hear us. If a number of members lose connection and the meeting becomes inquarate of the live streaming for public viewing fails, I shall adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow the connection to be re-established. Given this virtual meeting, there is no corporate responsibility to detail a fire procedure as we ordinarily would. However, I would like to highlight that this committee is being live streamed on social media, so all participants, please be aware of your actions and take appropriate safety precautions from your place of live streaming. Could I also please ask members to switch off switch off their microphones when not speaking. Agenda item number 1 is apologies. Are there any apologies?
No apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to receive declarations of interest by members and officers.
None of those received either, Chair.
Right, thank you. Agenda item number 3 is minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of May 2020, pages 5 to 8 on your agenda. I will move around the members in alphabetical order to determine if they are in favour, against or abstaining that they represent an accurate record. Please answer clearly only when your name is called. Councillor David Challoner, the minutes are okay with me. Thank you. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
Yes, no, it's okay, Chairman.
Thank you, Carolyn. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
You just need to unmute your microphone, please, Councillor Entwistle.
In agreement, David.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
For, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols. I know you weren't in attendance at that meeting, but obviously you will have had a copy of the minutes and you can read them. So if you can establish if you're for, against, or wish to abstain.
Yeah, I'm for.
Thank you.
I've had a read through.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
Minutes are okay, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
For, Chair.
Thank you. I can take those as a true and accurate record. Agenda item number 4 is the minutes for action and implementation listed on page 9 of your agenda. I can inform you that these have been addressed. Agenda item number 5 is the outstanding minutes list on page 11 of your agenda. There are no outstanding minutes. We move on now to agenda item number 6A, is key decision number 815, financial outturn 2019 to 2020, pages 13 to 88 of your agenda. The officer who is going to present this report is Julie Falger. Over to you, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the financial outturn report for 2019-2020. If we can start with the general fund outturn, which is at page 16, paragraph 3.1. Members will be able to see that the general fund service areas underspent by just over £1.2 million. There were further underspends within other budgets, which left a total of £1.242 million underspend. After movements to and from reserves, it left a net underspend of £836,000, which was transferred to the general reserve. There are a number of significant variances that make up the overall underspend, and these are detailed in paragraph 3.3 of the report. Members will also find full details of all variances greater than £10,000 relating to this to the general fund in Appendix A. Moving on now to carry forwards. There are a number of requests from officers to carry forward underspends from 1920 into 2021, and these are detailed in paragraph 3.5. The HRA outturn for 1920, detailed at paragraph 3.8. An overall underspend of 884,000 for the year for the HRA. Of this underspend, £75,000 was transferred into an earmark reserve, with the remaining £749,000 transferred into the HRA reserve. As I've just mentioned, the £75,000 is a carry forward request and relates to the door and window replacement programme. Moving on now to the capital outturn. Members will see in the table at paragraph 3.13 that a total of £16.124 million was spent on the capital programme during 1920. This represents 63% of the approved budget, and it leaves a £9.648 million underspend. The funding of the programme is via a combination of methods, and these are summarised in paragraph 3.14, and they're also detailed in Appendix C. The majority of the underspending year is to be requested to be carried forward to 2021, and the details of the schemes to be carried forward are detailed in Appendix D. If we look at provisions against future events, the provisions that require member approval are detailed in the table at paragraph 3.16. Moving on now to impaired estimates on debtors. Members will be able to see the amounts of impaired debtors to be approved in the table at paragraph 3.17. Usable capital reserves. Capital reserves are used to fund the capital programme, and the position as at the 31st of March 2020 is detailed in the table that you can see at paragraph 3.19. In terms of the revenue reserves, the table at paragraph 3.20 shows the opening balances, the movements in year, and the closing balance as at the 31st of March 2020 for all revenue reserves, and full details are provided in Appendix E. If we now move on to the collection fund, the overall balance on the council tax account as at the 31st of March 2020 was for a £504,000 surplus. Bassett Law's share of this surplus was £53,000. In terms of business rates, the balance on the account as at the 31st of March 20 was a deficit of £3.188 million, of which £1.275 million was Bassett Law's share. Appendix F details the council share of the Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund. And that's at Appendix F. In terms of the balance sheet, the significant movements that members should be aware of are detailed in paragraph 3.29 of the report. Now moving on to the Treasury Management outturn. Under the Treasury Management Code of Practice, an annual outturn report is required to be presented to Council, which will detail and explain the activities in the year. And this report is presented for your information at Appendix G. The report includes the prudential indicators that the council is required to report and monitor, and I can tell members there are no issues to highlight on these indicators. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Linda, for that. Julie, for that report. I will now go through members, asking them if they have got any questions on Julie's report. Councillor David Challoner, I've got no questions on your report. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
Yes, Chairman. On page 20, the environmental health property sale. Could you tell us what property we are talking about?
You need to unmute, Julie.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. Sorry, Councillor Troop, could you just repeat it because I didn't catch all of it? Sorry.
Yes, page 20. General fund provisions. Environmental health property sale. Do we have knowledge of what the property was that we sold?
Chair, I think I can give you some more detail on this.
Yeah.
I think it's a property. I can't remember where it is at the moment, but it's a property I think we can pull through purchased, but we can't trace the owner. So that if it ever gets sold, we'd have to repay the owner if he ever turns up, or he or she ever turns up. So we've put that provision in there to put aside some money in case that occurs.
Thank you, David. Thank you,
Right,
Chairman.
okay. Councillor Gary Clarkson, have you got any questions?
No questions from me, Chair, on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
None from me, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
None from me, David.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
No, nothing from me, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
Pass, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
Yes, please. Just very quickly in 3.4, it talks about underspends on service budgets, and from what I'm reading, am I understanding it correct that it's generally about vacancy costs being taken over? And if this is the case, have we got any ideas of whether there'll be a staffing review or a review of vacancies, and when these vacancies may be filled?
Yes, the table, paragraph 3.4, does detail the major summarised variances, and you can see one of the large variances is employee savings, which is net of any agency costs. So there are some quite significant employee savings there. I think it's different throughout the council. I think there are a number of vacant posts that are in the process of being filled. We're in the process of being filled. Obviously, COVID has delayed that somewhat, but I think it's whether every single vacancy is expected to be filled in the future. I wouldn't have those details to hand. All I would say is that the establishment is fully funded, and hence if there are any vacancies, that's why we get the the saving, and the establishment is there to support the running of the services. So by that, you would assume that there are attempts to fill the posts.
Am I right also in understanding that has a knock-on effect on things like the door and window replacement? It talks about the inability to complete because of vacancies, and also the fact that we're using agency. That would be a more costly way of filling our vacancies, would it not? So can I just ask again? Have we got a staffing review or a review of vacancies coming up? And is that something, or is it something that we're going to look at?
In terms of agency, you're right. Sometimes it is more expensive. It isn't exclusively always more expensive. I think there are times when it can just about balance out. All staff appointments have to go through an approval process through a corporate management team. So even though we might be using agency, they do have to be fully funded, either through vacancy savings and or through other savings. In terms of service reviews that are going to be carried out, I think that would have to come from the appropriate heads of service. And I'm not aware personally of whether there's going to be a corporate review of vacancies. I don't know whether Dave Hill has got any more information.
I could just come in on that, please, Chair. Just on the vacancies first, there was a whole raft of reviews last year, including a housing review, as you know, and a finance and property services review. I know that because I did it. And out of that, there was quite a few vacant posts created during the year from those reviews, and that's contributed to that 374,000 underspend. If I can just take you back to that table in paragraph 3.3 showing the underspend. If you look at it, the net cost of service is 1.2 million underspent. There's two significant one-off underspends in there. The first one being the A1 balance transfers. That's because we've finally wound A1 housing up, and we've taken their balance sheet and combined it with ours. Coming into our balance sheet was a 750,000 cash balance, which that is. So that's a one-off, and that will not happen again. Similarly, the VAT refund, that was to do with charging VAT on leisure services. There was a court challenge, and this claim goes back to, I think, 2008, somewhere around there, before BPL were around. And we found that we paid over VAT to the HMRC in error. The court case, we didn't take the court case, somebody else did, but it had an impact on all the other councils, and we were able to reclaim that 319,000. There was also some interest on that you can see lower down, investment borrowing interest, and it says includes VAT refund interest. So we got not only 319, but interest on top of that. So when you take those two one-offs out, it amounts to over £1 million. It really looks then that the net cost of services is about right, that the budget was about right, and that there's no significant ongoing savings that will follow in future years. It's just the effect of the one-offs.
Thank you.
Thanks for those questions being answered. Councillor Ben Soffler, have you got a question?
Where are general expenses and hospitality costs recorded under? Because obviously they'll have dropped off markedly since everyone's been away from site.
They'll be recorded under the appropriate committee area of where they've been incurred. So whether they relate to finance and property or housing services or environmental services.
Right, so they're broken down by committee and then not grouped as a. Okay.
In the report that you're given, yeah, in the way it's presented in this report, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to point out to councillors, obviously there's councillors that have been councillors for many years, but for obviously the newer councillors, Bassett Law District Council did used to have a lot of their own in-house service providers, i.e. and over the years, these services, it became unfinancially viable to run these services, and that's why one or two of the services have been put out to agency workers and things like that, because they found that it was more cost effective over the years. Obviously, at the 100-acre lane site, I think we used to have where they used to make their own doors, windows and things like that. But obviously nowadays, as the prices and everything's come down, it was more cost effective to outsource and things like that. So over the years, the financial teams and obviously the financial services within the council have looked at these, and that's why we try to provide the best service possible to all our households that come under our portfolio. So that's just to give a bit of a background for the newer councillors. Obviously, established councillors like Carolyn Troop and obviously Jill and Cliff and them, they would know that these services were or used to be provided by the council, but over the years they've now gone out to agency workers and private contractors. That's just to bring you up to speed, basically. I will now move to the recommendation.
Sorry, Chair. I think Stephen Wormold wants to make a comment.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was only that I could answer Councillor Troop's question if you wanted me to.
Yeah.
Councillor Troop, Dave Hill was correct. It was a property that Environmental Health had a charge on because of works that they did, which meant that the council could then take the property to auction and sell it and recover its money. And then it holds the rest of the money for the owner, which it couldn't trace in case they come forward. But it's a cottage at Gringley on the Hill.
Right, thanks for that explanation, Steve. Is that okay, Carolyn?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right. I will now move to the recommendation on page 14. If members would like to respond, if they are in favour, against, abstaining, please answer clearly. Thank you. Councillor David Challoner, I'm in favour. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
For Dave.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7A is draft statements of accounts 2019/20, which was sent out separately. I would ask the officer, David Hill, to give us this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First thing I'll just mention is the timetable, which has changed this year because of the situation with COVID-19. Originally, we had the timetable of signing the draft accounts off by 31st of May and the final accounts by 31st July. That's now changed because of the difficulty some councils are having. And the new rules are that the draft account has to be signed off 31st of August and the final accounts by 30th of November. However, having said that, we are sticking to our original timetable. We have got the auditors due to come in on the 22nd. And so we thought if we could make that timetable, we'll stick to it, which we are doing. Tonight you'll receive the draft accounts. They'll then be open to a period of public inspection, which runs from 15th of June to 24th of July. That's required by regulations. So, and it's I think it's 30 days, 30 working days that they have to be available. As I've said, Mazars will start the audit on 22nd of June. They'll then be open to a period of public inspection, which runs from 15th of June to 24th of July. That's required by regulations, and it's I think it's 30 days, 30 working days that they have to be available. As I've said, Mazars will start the audit on 22nd of June. They'll then be open to a period of public inspection, which runs from 15th of June to 24th of July. That's required by regulations, and it's I think it's £30
million.
Sorry, I don't know if everybody was hearing that. I was hearing feedback on my voice was repeating itself. Was everybody hearing that? Clara, did you?
I could just hear it repeating.
You could hear it repeating.
Yeah.
I could as well.
You might have to go over it again. Sorry, Dave.
Right. I'll continue from where my repeating left off. So I was just saying that I'll start on 22nd of June, and then on the 23rd of July, 6 weeks tonight, we'll receive the final accounts, or audit committee will receive the final accounts and the report from the auditors, at which point hopefully it'll be complete. I realise that the public inspection period overlaps the final audit committee. So the 23rd of July is the audit committee. The period of inspection doesn't finish till the 24th. We usually include on that, on the recommendation on the 23rd, that I, as Section 151 officer, is authorised in agreement with the internal auditors to make any adjustments between then and the 31st of July. So that's not going to be an issue, that the public inspection is still open. I realise that the final accounts is quite a major document and quite complex. It's governed by regulation. A lot of it's prescribed by regulation. So what I'll do is I'll go through it slowly and refer to the page numbers so that you can turn the page numbers up and see what I'm saying. As you look at the final accounts, the first bit of the final accounts is the narrative report. That's on pages 159 to 179. And if you wanted a quick summary of what the accounts are all about, that will tell you. It also links it to the council plan, and it gives you a summary of performance. It also looks at the plans for the future for the council and gives you an explanation of the core statements. If you don't read anything else of the accounts, I would recommend you read that, and then you'll get a flavour of what it's all about. Following that, on page 180, we've got the statement of responsibilities. That shows you what your responsibilities are as an audit committee, through the council's responsibilities through the audit committee, and also details my responsibilities. You'll notice at the bottom of that page 180.
Can I just ask something? I can't follow that because we are working with this document at the moment.
Sorry. Yes.
What the page numbers are not correlating.
Right. I'm working on the page numbers of the agenda. If you've got a printed copy of the agenda,
It won't include that statement of accounts though, because that was sent out after. So the page numbers for that.
Okay. So.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, you're all right. I can work around that. So you've got that document. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I don't think there's any numbering on there, apart from the last bit of the narrative statement. Have you got numbering? I don't think you have. The last bit of the narrative statement is page 25. If you can find page 25. Yeah. That's the last bit of the narrative statement. The page after that, I don't think the pages after that are numbered, are they?
Yes, they are, Dave.
They are. Oh, right. It's just me that's got a copy that's not numbered then.
Expenditure and funding analysis.
Yeah, well, there's a page before that. It's called Statement of Responsibilities for the Statement of Accounts.
Yes.
Right. Okay, if you've got that, that is the bit that shows you the council's responsibilities exercised through the audit committee, which is the top bit, and my responsibilities as Section 151 officer. At this stage on the draft accounts, it's just me that signs that. When you see the final accounts that are presented on the 23rd, you'll find that the chair of the audit committee, Councillor Challoner, will have to sign that as well. But at the moment, that's just me to sign that off. The next page you've got is the start of the core statements and the expenditure funding analysis. Although the expenditure funding analysis isn't the core statement. Now, the expenditure funding analysis gives you a summary of performance, and it will reconcile you. If you're really paying attention to the outturn report, you'll see some figures in there that were in the outturn report as well. And that reconciles the two. The next pages are what's called the core financial statements. So the first one you'll have got will be the movement in reserve statement. Or have you got?
Yeah, we got that. Yeah.
Right. So the movement in reserve statement, that shows the movement in the year between the different reserves. You can see the headings at the top, the general fund balance, earmarked reserves, housing revenue account, and so on. And that will detail down there, and you've got the comparatives below. So there's a table for 2019-20, and there's a table for 2018-19. And you'll see that as we go through the accounts, particularly on the core statements, that there's always a column showing previous year's figures. And that will help you identify movements between last year and this year, which might be significant that you may want to raise questions about. So the movement in reserve statement, it also splits it between usable reserves, those that we can use to spend, and unusable reserves. The unusable reserves are non-cash reserves, so such as the revaluation reserve, it's created as a non-cash reserve when, for example, property prices increase. We have to increase the value of our property, but it's not represented by a cash amount, so we can't use them because it's just simply not cash. The next one you might have, I'm saying you might have because I'm not looking at the same document as you've got. You should have a comprehensive income and expenditure statement. I've got that before the movement in reserve statement, but you might have it afterwards. Can everybody find the comprehensive income and expenditure statement?
That's before, Dave.
Right, okay. Mine's obviously out of order. So this statement, if everybody's found it, this records all of the council's income and expenditure for the year. So you can see, and it's analysed by the internal management structure. So you can see chief exec, corporate services, finance and property, and so on, analysed individually. And the bottom half deals with corporate transactions. So financing, investment, and expenditure. That's all the loan interest and so on. You will see, as I said before, on the left-hand side, you'll see the 18-19 figures and the 19-20 on the right. And you'll see just before the 19-20 figures that some are referred to notes. After the core statements, there's a whole sequence of notes, and that will help you navigate around which notes, and that will give you more detail on what's behind those figures. The next one you'll see is the council's balance sheet, which should be the next page. That is it's simply a snapshot of the council's position at the year end on 31st of March. So it shows the assets, the liabilities of the council, cash balances and the reserves at that time. Again, they'll all be referred to notes because there's quite a lot of detail behind that, particularly on things like property, plant and equipment, which is, as you can see, is 349 million, and it forms a major part of our assets, mainly council housing, I will add. The next of the core statements is the cash flow statement. This shows the changes in cash balances during the year. So when we've got non-cash items that go in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, they're stripped out of the cash flow statement. So things like depreciation, which doesn't represent cash, that'll come out here. So, and you can see again, it's all related to notes. They're the main statements. After that, you've got a whole section on the notes to the accounts, and I think there's 42 notes in there. And I'll come back to note 1 in a second, because that's, as you know, that's one of the responsibilities of the audit committee, is to review the accounting policies, and they're all contained in note 1, which I'll come back to. Just to finish off what the rest of the statement of accounts contains, there's certain supplementary statements towards the end of the accounts, and these are specifically for the housing revenue account, which contains all the transactions related to the council housing stock and the tenants. There's the collection fund, which is a record of all the business rates and council tax coming in and how we pay it out to preceptors. And then finally, there'll be a glossary, which will help you with any of the technical terms that are in there. We try our best to make it plain English, but it's not always easy to do that. So that's the statement of accounts, and that's what format it takes. When you're reviewing the statement of accounts, and as you're aware, your job is to review the statement of accounts and to review the accounting policies in particular. But what you're looking for is it readable? You know, have we used too much finance language? Can we make it simpler? Can we get rid of some of the technical terms? And particularly, does it flow? You know, we try to make it as readable as possible, but we're doing it as accountants, and this is designed not for accountants and for people to read, such as members and members of the public. So it'd be good if you told us that anything that might make it flow better. We've tried to put it in a logical order, but you can tell us differently if you like. The other thing to look for is, and I've mentioned you've got the figures from last year, is any unusual increases, decreases. You know, has something jumped massively or reduced massively that you might want to raise a question on? I can't think of anything this year that stands out. In the outturn statement, we had a couple of figures in there, one on the property and plant increasing by 4.8 million, and one on the pensions figure that's reduced on the balance sheet. They're two quite significant figures on the balance sheet, but again, you can pick, if you find anything on there that you don't understand or looks to have moved quite a lot, please ask a question. Another thing perhaps to look at are reserves and balances on the balance sheet. If you go to the notes, it'll give you more detail on those. Are they adequate? You know, do you think they should be more or less? And you can ask questions on those. And another thing to look for is trends. Reducing income, smaller reserves, is expenditure increasing, and so on. And also increasing liabilities on the balance sheet, perhaps another thing to look for. So that's a few tips about what to look for when you're reviewing the statement of accounts. I'll go back now to the accounting policies. As I said, there's 42 notes to the account, but note 1 is perhaps the biggest one of the lot. And there's 23 accounting policies on there, not numbered, but given letters A to B, I think it is. This is particularly mentioned in the role of the audit committee, and the questions you've got to ask yourself are these accounting policies appropriate, and have they been followed? I think that's the two things you're looking for as you go through. As an example, if you go to note E, which is exceptional items, You can ask yourself there whether there's anything in the accounts that is required to be on a separate note. The policy says that when we find something exceptional, it's worthy of a mention, we should mention it either separately in the comprehensive income and expenditure account or in the notes to the accounts. And there may be things that you think warrant that mention or would need more explanation in a note. So that's how you would review the accounting policies, if you like, and bring it to our attention that something may look wrong or may need further explanation. So I'm not going to say much more about the accounts. You've got 6 weeks to raise all the questions. I hope I've given you a little bit of an insight into how they're constructed and what to look for in there. Just to summarise, we've got 6 weeks before they signed off, or slightly longer before they signed off, but 6 weeks before they come back to this committee. Please review the financial statements, ask questions or challenge the policies, raise concerns, either email me or Linda or both of us, or just give us a ring and record those questions. What we'll do is make a log of those questions, and that will form part of the report to the audit committee on the 23rd, so you can all see it. So by the end of July, we've got to approve the accounts, or the audit committee will be required to approve the accounts, consider and note the external auditor's report. And you will also, as the third recommendation, you'll be asked to give approval for the Section 151 officer, that's me, to sign the letter of representation, which I'll explain to you at a future meeting. The report is the recommendation is that members receive the draft statement of accounts. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, David, and thank you for pointing members in the right direction with the accounts. I'll go around the councillors asking them if they've got any questions at this moment in time as regards to do with the report which you've just done. But obviously, like you have explained, as there's 6 weeks to read and go through the accounts and everything, if anybody has got any burning desires to ask any questions, like David said, you can either email him, contact him, and the same goes with Linda Turner as well. And hopefully that'll go to show that we do a robust scrutiny on this committee. So I'll go around. I, David Challoner, have got no questions. Councillor Caroline Troop, have you got any questions?
No questions at the present time, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson?
No questions at the moment. I'll go through the accounts and get in touch with Dave later on. Thanks, Chair.
Cheers. Councillor Cliff Entwistle?
No questions, David, at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman?
No questions, David.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle?
No questions at this time, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler?
No questions. I'd just like to sort of one observation. I do like the format, and I do like the corporate branding that's being used at the moment, with, you know, kind of pictorial references. Just one quick observation as well. If we are asking questions, can we all know and understand the questions and the responses so that we don't repeat questions constantly, please?
Okay, thanks, Lynn. That's noted. Councillor Ben Sofflet?
None at this time, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll move to the recommendation, obviously, for members. If you are in favour, against or abstaining, please answer clearly so it can be recorded. So, Councillor David Challoner, I'm in favour. Councillor Caroline Troop?
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson?
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle?
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Sofflet.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. I will now move on to agenda item number 7B, is Code of Conduct, End of Year Analysis, pages 89 to 94 of your agenda. And I will ask the officer, Steve Wormold, to give us this report, please. Over to you, Steve. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a report that's brought to committee each year. It's the end of year analysis for Code of Conduct matters. And the purpose of the report is to provide members of the committee an overview of the Code of Conduct arrangements that the Council has in place, including an update of Code of Conduct complaints for the preceding year. And members will see that the Code of Conduct arrangements remain unchanged from previous years. They're now quite long-standing arrangements. The Localism Act came in 2011. We as a council put in place arrangements in 2013, and they've remained in place since. And the Audit and Risk Scrutiny Committee play quite an important role in Code of Conduct. They have the role of general oversight, which is why they receive this report each year, and they may be asked to convene a standard subcommittee in the event that they have to hear a complaint. Fortunately, today we haven't had to convene a standard subcommittee, but that is something that members may be called upon to do in the future. So members will see at paragraph 3.4 of the report, that sets out details of the 7 complaints that the council has received over the preceding year. None of them have related to district councillors, each have been related to parish councillors, and obviously they are anonymised, but you get a general flavour of what the complaints have been about. Of those, 2 were rejected and the remaining 4 were ongoing. Obviously that only adds up to 6, but we had 2 complaints about the same subject member, so there were 7 complaints in all. Just working through the report, the other point of note at paragraph 311 is obviously there was an election year last year and all members were required to attend the mandatory Code of Conduct training. That's set out paragraph 311, and members will recall attending that. So the recommendation of the report is at paragraph 6.1, and it's merely that the Audit and Risk Scrutiny Committee notes the summary of complaints received for this preceding year.
Thank you, Steve, for that report. I'll now go around the councillors asking all councillors if they have got any questions on Steve's report. Councillor David Challoner, I've got no questions. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
No questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson.
No questions, but just a brief statement. Obviously, a year into our term of office, it's quite encouraging that there have been no disputes or complaints about Bassett Law District councillors at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. That is noted. I think we do run a very tight ship, especially with the Code of Conduct. And obviously, everybody attending the training is very important because it sets out the precedents, what you have to do as a district council. I think that's very important, and thank you for picking that up. Councillor Cliff Entwistle. Councillor Cliff Entwistle, are you in favour or against?
Accepted, Dave.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
One question.
Okay.
That's it. A number of on 3.1, Chair. A number of enquiries were dealt with informally. Another complaint submitted through the year which failed the initial intake test. I won't read it all. But who makes that initial assessment now? Does the Mr. Wormold make that assessment, or does a number of people make that assessment now, please?
If you'd like to answer that, please, Steve.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. The initial intake test is undertaken by the monitoring officer in consultation with the independent person. The independent person, Andrew Middleton, you have probably seen at the Code of Conduct training, but he's, as his title suggests, someone independent of the council who the monitoring officer can seek to consult with. But yeah, it's a question for the monitoring officer in consultation with the independent person.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Inshuler.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendation is set out on page 92. I'll go around members again, asking if you are in favour, against or abstaining. Councillor David Challoner, I'm in favour. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
In favour of noting, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7C is Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, in brackets RIPA. Review of use of powers and policy, pages 95 to 150 of your agenda. Once again, the officer to give this report is Stephen Wormold. Over to you, Steve.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Again, this is a report that is brought to the committee each year. You as a committee have oversight of the council's use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which is effectively the act governing how the council undertakes covert surveillance. It's something that the council very rarely does now, and members will see from the report that no authorisations have been given in the preceding year, so the council hasn't needed to undertake covert surveillance. One of the main reasons why it is so rarely used now by local authorities is there's quite a high threshold to overcome to be able to use it, and it can only be used for the detection of a crime, and a crime that would carry a sentence of at least 6 months imprisonment. So generally the council is able to detect crime using other means, whether that be witness evidence, reports from the public. It generally doesn't need to use covert surveillance, and indeed hasn't done for the last year, and I don't think did for the 2 preceding years either. The other safeguard that is in place is that local authorities also have to get authorisation from a Justice of the Peace, so it has to be signed off by a magistrate's court. So the first part of the report is obviously just to report on the council's use of RIPA. It hasn't used any in the last year. And the second is we each year have to have the council's corporate policy on the use of RIPA renewed and approved by the committee. That's contained at Appendix A. It's unchanged from previous years, so we're asking really for the committee just to reaffirm that policy. So the recommendations are set out at paragraph 6. There are 2 recommendations. The first is to receive the contents of the report and note the number of authorisations granted in 2019. As I've said, that was nil. And the second one is to approve the council's RIPA policy and procedure document, the contents of which are unchanged. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report, Steve. I'll now open it up to councillors to ask any questions on this report if they've got any. So, Councillor David Challoner, I've got no questions. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
No questions, Chair. It's straightforward.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
It is straightforward. However, can I just ask in paragraph 1 under corporate policy statement, it does talk about that we can update, amend and delete, add or substitute relevant provisions as necessary. I take it that would be you, Steve. And can I just ask what the feedback mechanism is if there are changes made?
If you'd like to answer, please, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just ask which paragraph we're looking at, Councillor Schuler?
It's on page 102 on the copy that I've got. So it's the first, the corporate policy statement, number 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yes, I do have authority to amend it, but that would obviously be subject to your approval because you do approve the policy each year.
Yeah, so any amendments would be run past this committee. The other thing, that just an observation that I feel that that may make it a little bit more readable and a more usable document is to have links to the relevant documents that are outlined within the policy. So if somebody was reading it online, they could directly link into the documents that they needed to look at.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Schuler. I'll check whether that's the case online, but if it isn't, then I can certainly ask for that to be done.
There's just a couple of spelling mistakes as well. I'll email you about that later.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
Is it worth calling out drone photography separately rather than CCTV, given the increasing prevalence of drones?
Yeah, that is something we're looking at the moment, Councillor Soffler. We're looking at introducing a corporate policy for drone use.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you for answering the questions on that report, Steve. I will now move to the recommendation on page 97. If members would like to please respond if they are in favour, against or abstaining. Please answer clearly. Councillor David Challoner, I'm in favour. Councillor Carolyn Troop.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Clarkson.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Freeman.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Nichols.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Ogle.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Schuler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Soffler.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8 is any other business which the chairman considers to be urgent. There is no business that is urgent. I would like to thank all councillors this evening for their participation in this virtual committee meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. I'd like to thank all the officers for taking part and answering the poignant questions that they have been asked. And obviously, just to remind all councillors that when you are reading the statement of accounts, if you have got any questions that you require answering, if you would like to contact either Dave Hill or Linda Turner, please do so. And I wish you all a very good evening and good night and stay safe. Thank you very much. To the caster, please could you end the casting on live stream? Thank you.